It's less about, oh, I need to take on a family business to prolong my parents' legacy than it is to, for me, my joy is still in community building and giving back. And if I can make the company as successful as it can be, then we're gonna have the resources to give back. I just hate to see family businesses not even attempt to try to succeed to the next generation because of those illogical fears. Why not try it for a little bit and see?
Strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle in your family business. This is Fearless Family Business. What if the very thing that you spent your life running from ended up becoming your greatest opportunity to serve? Hey everyone, I'm Adam Hill, and in today's episode of the Fearless Family Business Show, I'm joined by Kevin Tsao, Chief Sustainability Officer of Eno Brands and a second-generation leader of a fashion jewelry company based in Southern California. Now, Kevin didn't just resist the family business. He rejected it outright, and I get it. When it feels like your path is being built for you before you've even had a chance to discover your own, it's easy to push back. But what struck me most in this conversation is how Kevin came full circle, not out of obligation, but out of purpose. Because legacy isn't about living in the past. It's about aligning your future to something bigger than yourself. So if you're navigating identity, generational pressure, or wondering what your role really is in the story of your family business, this one is for you. And hey, if this one hits home, please be sure to subscribe for more fearless conversations about family, business, and legacy. Kevin, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure being here, Adam. I was like telling you before, I feel like I made it to the big time.
We have, yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. Because I mean, I've seen you on stage. You've been interviewing people. You've been
That's right.
You've been giving out awards lately and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you're a big deal, dude.
Oh, come on. It's nice to highlight other family businesses. Like, I feel like that's like the best part. Doing anything about myself, I'm always kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. But
right, exactly.
Talking about other family businesses, like, the Dr. Bronner's when we did that kind of awardee, that was pretty awesome. Like seeing these big companies come out to our events and things like that. So pleasure being here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. So yeah, just kind of touching on that, we met really through our local family business center, Cal State Fullerton, where we both operated businesses in Orange County.
That's right.
I recently left mine. You're still there in the thick of it, and we've been connected for quite a while. So I know a lot about your story, and I'm really glad to hear to have you on, because I think your story can impact a lot of people, and just kind of sharing how your experience would be it. So yeah, I'd love to maybe just dive in and share a little bit about the history and where you come from. How'd you come about?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about this podcast coming up, and I was like, if only we had recorded a lot of the conversations you and I've had at our lunches, that's the stuff. And I'm like, oh, I wish we had captured that. But Adam, obviously, you know me well. My name is Kevin. I work for a company called Eno Brands. We're a fashion jewelry manufacturing company. I'm second gen. I've been in the company for, I want to say, roughly about 12 to 13 years, something around that. But as most family businesses, it feels like you've been in the business all your life, if you know what I mean. I'm sure many people on the podcast have said that. I was born and raised here in California in Orange County. But I was vehemently, as Adam knows, against joining the family business. I was very much of the mindset that, if I did that, what was the point of going to college? What was the point of going to high school? You should have just continued on. And this idea of being, and so actually backing up, I don't have any siblings, so it's just me. So this idea that I was going to be ordained to take over this family business felt like it was even more singular to me, right? Versus if I had a brother or sister, maybe it's like, oh, maybe sister will take it or brother will take it. It was just more of like, this was the thing. But I was so against doing it because I felt strongly that I had an education. My friends were getting jobs elsewhere. I should go do that. So I did do that for the first couple of years. I was interested in politics and history. I worked for the state. And then, but then after a while working for the state, you're thinking, boy, that's quite bureaucratic. The pay's not great.
Sure. In California, really?
In California. And it was during furloughs, if you remember that, the furlough time.
Oh, yeah, I do.
And so like, here I go, like get extra 30 days of vacation that I was like, oh, this is neat. And then realizing that maybe this isn't what it all chalked up to be. As much as I miss it still now, I realize that probably wasn't going to be a long-term thing, even as I look back now. So about 2 years after working for the state, my grandma, we would eat, Chinese family, we eat on Sundays together. My grandma's first phrase when I was working at the state, she would always be like, why are you still working for the state? Why are you working for the state? It wasn't like, hey, grandma, like, how are you? It's just, I can't believe you're working for the state. And so eventually she wore me down, and then I joined the family business, and here I am 15 or 12 years later. It's been a lot of ups and downs and figuring things out. But, I have to say overall, I feel very fortunate to have been given the opportunity to work in the family business. And I feel like over the last couple of years, especially, there's been more of a momentum shift of like, okay, I can see what the goal is going to be. And for me, it's less about, oh, I need to take on the family business to prolong kind of my parents' legacy than it is to, for me, identifying that like my joy is still in community building and giving back. And if I can make the company as successful as it can be, then we're going to have the resources to give back. So that's been my momentum and where I stand right now. And joining family business centers like this has given me kind of that insight too. So, but I'll stop there. That's kind of my spiel.
I love it. No, it all comes back around, like it all comes back full circle. Like, with you started out wanting to kind of be in politics, civic duty, all this kind of stuff. And it comes around that you're like actually serving out your passion within the family business and helping and serving in the community. Yeah. So, and I love the idea of, sitting around the dinner table, your grandmother saying, why are you working for the state? Why aren't you working for the family business yet? Because most families, most people, like when you don't have a family business, the question is, when are you getting married? Why are you not married yet? In the family business, it's people asking, why are you not in the family business yet? Yeah. So I'm curious as to what the trigger was for you that like got you thinking about like, well, maybe maybe the working for the state's not all it's cracked up to be. Maybe the family business, when you were so vehemently against it, what changed in you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, I wonder if I've, painted it with a rose, I'm wearing with rose-colored petals or something to kind of look back at where it was back then. But if I were being honest with you here, like, I think part of it was like, somehow I needed to, as most things, you needed to come to your own logic as to why you should do something or not do something, especially given the noise of my grandma. As much as I love my grandma, but Grandma Lucy being in my ear every single, there was a certain level of frustration of hearing that as well. And even so hardened my stance against doing it, but I feel like a couple of things happened during kind of like at that 2-year mark. One, the elected official I was working for was terming out. So that was a big kind of decision point. I didn't want to continue on where I was if he was not going to be there. So I realized, okay, well, I can either follow him somewhere else, which would have changed, like life circumstances and where I lived, or I could go and find another elected official to do, but then I would start all over. So, and that's just the game of politics. So I think there was that piece of it. The second piece of it is my wife now, like, and I've only had one girlfriend my whole life, so she is now my wife. At the time, we were getting pretty close to like, okay, we've been around together for a long time. Like, is marriage kind of part of the equation and proposals and all that? So I think there were some life circumstances there. But I would say one of the biggest triggers for me was at some point, I think I matured a little bit in my mindset. And I tell this story a lot to the new generation, younger generation now, which is why I do so much with the Cal State Fullerton team, is because I felt like the reasons for wanting to not do the family business were really rooted in this base fear or scaredness or whatever you want to call it that I think was very real for me at the time. But as I look back now, it wasn't the most logical. And I think what I realized was I was running away from that family business for all these ideas or preconceptions of what I had of myself, of what other people may think when I join a family business. Things like, you got handed your job. You're working for a family business. You didn't earn it. All these kind of like negative thoughts that I realized, I think when I was maybe 19, 20, whenever I graduated, that was pretty loud. But at 20, 25, 23, 24, when I started deciding like, okay, maybe, I can do this. It's just that I needed to get there on my own. And that's really where I felt like whatever, blockage started to kind of lessen a little bit. But I was really intentional, as you know, Adam. I was like, when I joined the family business, I told my mom, I said, I want to start as receptionist. Put me right in the front in this building where I'm sitting right now, like right in the front. Like, don't give me any kind of handicap. I don't want anybody to feel like, hey, this was handed to me. I was really adamant about that because I said, if I'm going to earn the respect of people who literally watch me grow up in this family business, even though they're not family, they're not going to really respect me. Even if I were to become CEO or whatever, like, it's just not going to be real. I got to earn that. So I think putting these things in place and getting my mom to be on board with it helped make the transition to say, okay, Grandma, I'm going to do it, and not feel like I've given up my own stance, if that makes sense. So I think a combination of all those things, and frankly, at the end of the day, there's perks with being in a family business, right? Vacation, pay is better. I didn't have to, I could live, I could move back home. Like, there was a lot of those perks as well. So I think all that in conjunction was a realization that, okay, maybe it's time.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you say that. I mean, as I think some of the challenges and I think you're speaking to a lot of what a lot of the fears are that people coming into family businesses may face. I know I had those fears too.
Yeah.
Of, hey, I'm coming into a 100-year-old family business here that's 4 generations old. How do I avoid that sense of entitlement that's been imprinted in me for so long? That has been even imprinted in Hollywood in what movies depict or television shows depict as the typical family business. And overcoming that it's a hard fear to overcome. And I see it a lot more too in families because, there's not a lot of family members. I mean, it's overplayed how many family members are actually buy into that entitlement zone. I think it's amplified.
Totally.
For the most part, in most cases, family members want to work, and when they also want to be kind of accepted for who they are and what they're doing. Tell me about. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, and to that point, I think the tricky part too is like, family business is so synonymous with the last name too, and yours is even more so in that your business literally has your last name in it, right? And for me, like, even though it doesn't say, Tsao business or whatever, like, everybody knows Joyce, which is my mom, like Joyce Tsao, right? And so when a client sees a Kevin Tsao, like, and then it's like, oh, what's the relationship? And suddenly, like, you feel like there's also the shell of yourself that isn't truly there. You're Joyce's son versus Kevin Tsao, right? And so all these things, but then over time, I realized that's not a handicap. That's a positive thing. Like, as long as you spin it in the right way, right? And I think as a younger, more naive, more immature Kevin, I would definitely feel like at the time I was very guarded and sensitive to what does a client think when they see me, it's like, oh, you're Joyce's son, and then all that noise comes in. It's like, oh, you were just handed this position, and it's kind of this cycle. Whereas now I look at it as like, yeah, I'm Joyce's son, and that's a benefit. It's like, I have Joyce's ear. I can help make things happen. So it's that kind of maturity I feel like is difficult for younger generations as they're thinking about joining the family business, if they were similar to me, to overcome. And part of what I want to explain to them is that it's not just that story; it's also this other story.
Yeah. So So you're really shifting the narrative on what that head trash is telling you, like the idea of like, you're this that oh wait, I'm Joyce's son.
Yeah.
That's not an identity habit. You're actually embracing it and shifting on its head and embracing that.
And you can make it your own. That's like what I tell these students. I'm like, you as long as you want to put in the work. Like, I'm not telling you it's easy, but right. Boy, like at the end of that rainbow, there's a lot that you can gain from it too. So I just hate to see family businesses not even attempt to try to succeed to the next generation because of those, I feel like, illogical fears that may be true. Like, maybe you do get a parent that's like very overbearing, and then at least you can say, yeah, I don't want to do it. It's like, that's fine. Yeah. But to just outright reject it the way that I had at 21, I feel like I would have missed a big opportunity. And I feel like a lot of my friends who are in family businesses opted to go that way, which I tell them, like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to try? Are you sure your parents are going to be like that? Are you sure?
Right.
Why not try it for a little bit and see, and, I would hate to see family businesses, especially in the minority community, like restaurants, laundromats, like nail salons, even, like these are important businesses, but it's not sexy enough to like take over. But if you do, you can make it something different.
Yeah. Yeah. And people don't understand that like, think about family business, you're thinking about succession or like, different, like the mega, family. But we don't think about the fact that like most family businesses in the United States are, the mom and pop shops, exactly what you're talking about, restaurants, nail salons, all those things, that are succeeding generationally on a small level. And, exactly. And I think that those are the important ones that we need to talk to, as far as, and that's exactly what you're doing on the community level. And those are on the local level. So it's really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, I think the more that there's awareness, I think in hearing stories of like, yeah, I've been there. It stunk. Like I, it's not a good feeling to feel like, and it's easy to just say no. Because if you say right. no and then you go and get your own job, like there's no one's ever going to say like, hey, you didn't get that job. Like clearly you did. But could you not have taken those same skill sets that you bring to the table that a lot of these kids have and actually help? Because what I find is a lot of, especially again, I'm speaking mostly in the Asian community, it's like these immigrant families do want to pass it on. They just may not know exactly how to express that.
Sure.
And you have to be intentional. I tell this to be, I'm like, you have to be intentional with your parents. Like, in the office, your boss, I'm an employee, not mom and dad and son, where you sit in the table is important. You're in a company meeting. If you want to be rank and file, then you got to sit at the side. Head of the table is your mom. It's like, that's the boss. Right. These kinds of things, I think, are often, if laid out intentionally, actually makes it easier for everybody. I remember having a conversation with my mom, I think a year and a half in, I took her to this. I said, Mom, in these meetings, you got to stop seeing me as your son. Like, I know that's hard, but we got to check these titles at the door because it leads to some awkward conversations in front of staff. It's like everybody knows we're family, but they also need to respect me as an employee, that not getting preferential treatment. So I'm not saying it's easy, but if you have those conversations, it makes it a whole lot clearer. And I think your best chance of success too.
Yeah. That's a great insight too, when you're in those meetings. And, it reminds me of a lot of some of the conversation that happens around the idea of talking about our business as an extension of our families.
That's right.
And I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, because I have, growing up, we had the culture of, all of our employees are family. And I kind of came to believe that over time, that was maybe the wrong messaging, and, hearing in multiple places too, that maybe that's not the right messaging to have that entanglement. Maybe we should separate those out of it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I remember you bringing this up in one of our meetings once, and I was thinking in the back of my mind, I'm like, I feel like my mom's, that generation, my aunts and uncles, like the way they reached out is exactly what you alluded to, in the sense that like, this is my big family, all my employees. And then I think to some degree it works. With employees who have been there for maybe 15, 20 years or something, like they've been around for a long time and they understand where that's coming from. It gets tricky when you have new staff coming in who doesn't have a history and they're kind of like, why am I part of your family? Like, that's kind of, and it's like, and so I used to adopt what my mom, because my mom's a very warm, loving person. And that's why all the staff love her. But she's reached a certain level in her career where that works for her. As a guy, it's tricky as a guy to be like, I want to be a warm, hug everybody. Like, it doesn't work that way. We got to be real careful about that, A. But B, I'm also not at that age to have that kind of like, oh, I'm the older aunt, like with my, whatever, with my employees. So I've recalibrated a lot over the last, I want to say 5 years in particular, to be like, yes, we're a family business, but I really refrain from saying we're one big family. I say we're one big team. And that we have a strong team, we have a strong camaraderie. But I hesitate and I'm really cautious about saying we're a big family. Even in interviews, as I interview new people and bring into the company, I say we are a tight-knit team. I used to say we were a tight-knit family. And we're, once you're part of the team, you're family kind of thing. And I realized with some staff that was a tricky thing for them. Like, they don't necessarily want to feel like, hey, I have the obligations of becoming part of the family. I want to work here. I want to get a paycheck. I like to support what we're doing, but I don't want to feel the guilt of saying like, oh, at 10 p.m. if Kevin calls me, if a family member, you're going to pick up,
Right.
And so like there was those notions that I was like, oh, you really have to be intentional about this stuff. Otherwise, people who maybe if they're understanding like we're a family business is just the way we talk, they buy into the culture. But sometimes, especially now, younger generations that are coming in, they don't buy into that. It's not the same. They've gone to 5 different jobs before they reached here versus some of the staff I had, first job was with us and they've been here since that time. So I think there's a lot of those kinds of things that really play into the calculus now. So I fully agree with your sentiment there that, maybe that message worked at some point in time, but it certainly isn't one that I subscribe to now, because I worry about the notions that come along with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, it's a tough one. I think it's a great point too, that maybe it is a generational thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we have to be more attentive to what newer generations bring and what they want, what they expect as far as a relationship within the business and accountability and how that works. So that's another challenge within the family business arrangement is that there's multiple generations working in there, and trying to define that in one culture is often like, putting a square peg in a round hole a lot of times.
But what's interesting on that too is kind of like, though, I literally, like right before this, we had our postponed Memorial Day barbecue, like in our office. And the thing is, I do feel like it's a lot easier to bring that camaraderie and, culture into it when it's like my mom's like sense of like, oh, we're one big happy family. Like there's more of that camaraderie. What I find is trickier now, and maybe this is a byproduct of the generation, but also COVID, like just people not getting together. But that sense of like community bonding with our staff, it's like, because we're not necessarily espousing this idea that we're one big happy family and we're a team. There's also like there's nuances there too, So it's like I'm not saying necessarily like my mom's approach was like the wrong approach, because she definitely built a strong like that tight knit idea of being together that I'm trying to recreate in a different way here. But it's more work, because you have these red lines in the sand you kind of don't want to cross too. So it's an interesting dynamic for sure. To figure that out.
If you're a family business owner or operator and you're looking to get more control over your business, I would love to talk with you. I want to give you a special invite to request a free 90-minute workshop with me to learn the powerful tools of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Just shoot me an email at adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. Again, that email is adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. I'll put that in the show notes as well, and I look forward to talking to you soon. I'd love to hear too, because you've talked about your mom and you've talked about that generation. How did Eno Brand start? Like how did it come to be? Can you share a little bit about the
Sure.
history and how you got it? How it began.
Yeah. So, I should have said this in the intro, I guess. But yeah. So basically, my parents immigrated here in the 80s. My dad was a mechanic and went to Cypress College here locally. On the weekends there, they would do swap meets. And so he would sell his tools. My mom was still in Taiwan at the time. She was working for a jewelry company. So she had access to extra products. She would send these products to my dad. My dad would say, like, to make ends meet, sell his, make a little space in his table, sell his jewelry, my mom's jewelry, as well as his tools. And he realized over time that the jewelry was actually much more popular. Got rid of the tools, get all the jewelry out. And that's literally how this business sort of got started at the time. But it wasn't really who we are now until about 1993, when my dad went to China. And at the time, China was very much welcoming people coming in, kind of build out their factory, give their people work to do. And that's really when we got into manufacturing. And ever since then, there's been iterations and changes and tweaks to the factory, but that's who we've been through this time, until I will say, what's happened recently with, changes in China, tariffs and all that. But I would say in general, that's been our trajectory. We are an OEM manufacturer for a lot of brands. And my dad has been there ever since 93. So that's our business. Kind of in a nutshell, we basically produce product that are designed by brands, or we design what we call in-house open line, and then people select that and then sell it private label. So that's what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. And so your dad's still over in China now, basically managing the shops, and you're running the shop here, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, that's basically how my mom and dad set it up. My dad went over there to manage the factory. My mom stayed here to handle the sales. So we have a handle on both sides of it, from supply chain and then front end sales. And essentially my role has been more on my mom's side to kind of supersede her and succeed her position over time. But the question is, like, and we talked about this in our group, it's like, I'm not sure what to do with my dad's side of things, because in his mind, he wanted me to move over there. I grew up in a family where I saw my mom and dad have it's a difficult thing to live and be married that way. I did not want to replicate that, nor did my wife allow. Made it very clear before marriage that was not going to happen. So it's a tricky situation, as to, how we evolve the company go forward.
Yeah. So do you have an idea of how the succession plan is going to go for the Chinese side of things, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you I had it all figured out, Adam, but it's like, in my mind, my dad is getting close to 70. So like a few years, actually last year, I really said I need to have like a conversation with him. Be like, I know we don't usually talk about the future, but we got to really talk about the future. It's like, we're at this point where I need to know if you have a plan, Dad. And what I realize is that, the way that generation works, especially manufacturing, you kind of live until the next day. They're not thinking 6, 12 year ahead and all that. And so when I realized that was the case, I realized that we need to, here in California, figure out what that succession plan, should that not pan out, right? So if manufacturing goes away, what's the value we bring? We don't produce product here. How do we make it so that we can continue? So, obviously, I think there's still runway with the factory, and there's certainly things that are in place now that help with that. But I think long term, I don't think we are going to be a manufacturer in the future. I think what we are is really a supply chain solution, a portal for people who want to get into manufacturing. So, but in terms of like succession plan, like I've kind of feel like that boat has sailed. Like, I think we're now rolling with if something materializes, we'll capitalize on it. But our focus and our investment really is how do we make California more of a unique and standalone company that isn't reliant solely on that factory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is a lot of that decision driven by some of the some of the stuff that's going on now with regard to tariffs and all of that? Is that the nature of why you're shifting to?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly that has accelerated it, but I'd be the first to tell you, if you asked me 12 years ago, when I first started the company, what was my number one goal? It's probably been this, is that I felt that it was a messy kind of setup in terms of like, what's the long-term plan? I'm working in a company in which it's 100% reliant on one factory's success. If that factory fails, then we inherently would be stuck in a pretty tough position. So I've always said, how do we go beyond that engagement with one factory? And so about 2 years ago, we started to diversify into other countries, not knowing necessarily that the tariff situation would come as fast and as hard as it has. Our thought was that it would be something that potentially could happen over time. But it's fortunate that we started this process 2 years ago and started to do some of that work. But yeah, certainly and I shared this last time, like, I feel like this is the first time ever that I can think of where my father is actually thinking about the mortality of the factory. And as far as in 93, I was 5 years old. It's been a constant, like the factory. We don't even call it like China, which is the factory. It's like,
right. It's an ongoing,
It's just like a thing that we have in our company. To think of like that would be at risk is such a foreign concept that I think none of us, even now, are still understanding as to what the ramifications would be for that. So it is a formative time, I think, and a transition time for the company in a serious way.
Yeah.
Which is why the last
I guess
hectic.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's not like you're alone on that. I mean, it's just so many different businesses are having to figure that out on the fly.
Yeah.
How quickly this is coming too.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it ties into kind of something we were talking offline about a little bit too. This idea that hitting that plateau, or just kind of like maybe hitting that ceiling, especially within a family business. I mean, anything that's multi-generational is going to go through these seasons of rapid growth. Like you said, as a startup, you might like see 3 years of rapid growth, and then you hit this thing of like, now what? Like I'm at the ceiling. How do I break through it?
Yeah.
So, like, what do you think is one of the driving factors of like, a company like yours, who, you've been in business multi-generation, many years and gone through some of those cycles. What's this like? How do you address hitting that ceiling what does it take?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one in which I feel like I've gone through the ringer in terms of all of this, because like I feel, especially when I first started at this company, the first 5 years, figuring out, navigating the nuances of the family business, my own internal, conflicts of like joining a family business versus vehemently against it, like working all that out. In some ways that gave you a lot of obstacles to overcome, but also some goals to reach, right? It became clear. I didn't know the jewelry industry. My mom knew everything. There was a nice gap that you knew every day I'm going to make inroads on that. And so with that, there was a self-motivating factor that I want to get better. I want to improve. And so that first 5 years felt like, exciting, like income was better, like work life was better. I was getting married. And then, as I said to you, but at some point I got close to where my mom was, and then I surpassed my mom. And then I realized, oh shoot, there's no one else to look up to. It's like, oh crap, like you're at the top. And I tell everybody, I'm like, you want to be a manager, you want to be owner. I was like, be ready to be very alone, because when you're at the top, guess what? Your people look to you. And, there's no blueprint for how to get it done. Yes, there's a past history you can look at, a track record, but how do you navigate something like COVID? Who gave you, now here you go. You got to fire, half your staff over the phone so like, and it's just so foreign to us as an entity when we were so loving, family, whatever, to just call up someone, hey, sorry, I haven't seen you for 6 months, but by the way, I'm not going to see you for going forward either. Like that took a mental drainage on me. And I remember saying at one of our first affinity group, that was the time, like 2020, 2021, I felt really burnt out. Like I felt like a lot of what I was building just was falling apart. I felt that a lot of the values we had as a company were being challenged as to like, were we really as family oriented as we thought we were, as team oriented? It's like all these things, and it was tough. And I felt at the time also like I was at the point where, my mom and I were pretty much on the same level. Clients knew who I was and all that. And I realized I was like, I don't really want to do this either. So there was a lot of this, like these forks in the road at the time. And I remember I took a step back and I let some of my team members that I felt were more stable kind of take the lead a little bit. And I said, I'm going to be here, but I want you guys to kind of be more kind of managing it. And that took, about a year and a half before I figured it out, which was, I shared with you, it's like, I realized my passion still lay in community. And at the end of the day, giving back, being involved in organizations and all that, that's really what drove me to be excited about coming to work. And so kind of the shift that I made was I realized that if I make the company as successful as it can be, we'll have the resources to be able to invest and do those kinds of things. And then suddenly it was like a shift. Suddenly when I was on this plateau that was sort of cratering lower, finally, like we got a little shot in, and then it's like, now we're back this way. And that's the ups and downs. And I didn't realize I was in a valley, if you will, at the time. I just felt like, as many companies were during COVID, that things were just falling apart. So with the tariff situation this time, I can tell this is a very different approach. The same seriousness to the company is the same, is there, but how we react, how my mental capacity is reacting. And one thing that I'll share with your crowd, it's like what Adam taught me is less about balance and more about harmony. Like having these tools at the table to kind of navigate the valley in a much more productive way. Not just, throw my hands up, I'm going to just step back and not engage and let someone else clean up the mess. There is more of an engagement in saying like, okay, we've been through this before. Like we just got to find the right harmony amongst all the things that we have. And that's what I would say, to your question about like, where to find the motivation. Like I think you have to take the time to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And if you don't, and I would say that's actually much more important than anything else. Like if you don't do that, anything you do is always going to continue to struggle against that. Like, especially when things are tough, like, why am I doing this? Like for me now, it's like, this stinks. This tariff situation stinks. But I'm like, but boy, if I get this right, then I can get back to, the community stuff that, I found a lot of joy in. That, again, it just takes some experience having gone through some of those trials and tribulations to get there. But it is tough, though. I feel like at every point in time, you're going to hit a plateau. And the question is like, are you going to take the time and effort to figure out what the next milestone is going to be? Because it's there. I used to think there wasn't. I thought I was at the top and I said, okay, it's just sky now. But there's more. You just got to build it, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. In EOS, we call it the evolution and the revolution periods. You have these periods of evolution where you're growing. You're like, nothing could go wrong. Right. And then you have these periods of revolution where you hit the ceiling and like everything has to change. Yeah. Or you have to think differently. Yeah. And I love how you put it, because the way that you've approached it, like during COVID, I mean, you were telling our story there too, where it was like jumping into this role in 2018 and then 2020 we get into COVID and you're right, it feels so alone. And you're on the phone making all these decisions and trying to figure everything out in this new world. Yeah. And you have to be the one that changes. Right. And I like the way that you approached it with this idea of kind of delegating a lot of that out, just like handing it off to your team. That's just one of the ways that, you can break through the ceiling is through delegation and all of that. Yeah, no. And I think that's
like what I've learned over time is that, you're only as strong as your weakest team member in many ways. And, and if you give them the power and empowering them to kind of move into that role, more ideas come to the table, more innovation. And one thing that I shared with our group is that like one of the worries that I had was like, I didn't feel like jewelry is my passion in general. And I was worried that lack of alignment and passion on what leadership means to be a leader of a company that is in fashion, like how would we succeed? Like how would I be able to further my mom's legacy and the company's longevity and our staff's income streams and all that? And then it was through our group I realized like, oh, you don't actually have to always be the CEO. You can tap someone to do that. And I said, oh, like, and that's literally a year and a half ago. That realization propelled me on this other journey of like, I always thought that I only had one path. And I realized through this is that path is still in the same direction. It's just going to go through someone else, which is exciting because I can actually do what I think I'm more suited to do, which is more on the strategy and sustainability side. Whereas you put someone who is into fashion, who understands fashion, who's female, which I think is critical in this industry, for them to do that work. And they're gonna iterate upon it in such a much better way than I can, and I can complement that. And we can still be successful as a company, and I think that's where I wish I could bottle all those experiences and share it with these new, like people who were me 12 years ago today, right? And
right.
Who looks at that and they're like, there's no way I can do it. I'm like, yes, there is. Like there is such a way. Because like our company is not marketable. It's not easy to sell who we are. Like it's just not. It's like it's built on relationships and the factory engagement. So the value of the company is not necessarily high, but it can generate income, it can generate profits if you set it in the right way. And so I feel like that story is very similar to a lot of these people that I talk to. They're like, my dad is the business, my mom is the business. There's no way I can crack through that. And they may be right, but I'm saying like, boy, it's not that black and white, like people change, situations change, and you may find that there's something to do that is something close to your passion, which is sort of what I've come to understand, which is exciting. And that's where that runway feels a little bit more linear than it is kind of plateauing. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I know we've talked in the past about kind of that idea of that you were bringing on that integrator and kind of passing on the CEO responsibilities.
That's right.
And so you're now you're chief sustainability officer. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
In terms of your role, so what does that mean as far as what your role is in the organization versus say the CEO?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in a small business, I always joke. I'm like, titles don't really mean much. We kind of make up our own titles. But it sounded nice. No, I'm just kidding. I think for us, like originally when the sustainability word came into play, it was because in our business, like audits and compliance and community, like actually all of that is encompassing in how we define sustainability. But what I've realized that in practicality, internally speaking, sustainability for us is this journey for me has always been about figuring out what is a sustainable path for us as a company to grow and continue beyond my parents' generation. I have 3 kids now. I understand at some point that conversation will come up too. How do I make sure that our company is sustainable for their generation? And then perhaps down the line, 5th, 4th, 6th, 7th, generation. Like to me, I feel like my job is on the front end, like sustainability in the way that we think about externally, like environmental and all those things. But internally speaking, it's really about this internal drive to ensure that our company moves away from, just reliance on one factory, but being sustainable as a family business. And to me, that's really my job more than anything else. Like it's taking me 12 years to understand that. But that's really what it is. Tapping this integrator, like you said, to take over. That's actually sustaining the company long term. So I'm really iterating on that word in a different way. But to me, even though other people outside may not look at that the same way, I look at it as very clear what my job is. It's to ensure, this boat that we're on continues to flow down the river, or if that boat is sinking, then build the new boat so that we can continue to sustain what our ecosystem looks like. That to me is really what I think my job is. And I think I'm comfortable in doing that job. More so than saying, hey, I want to be CEO and making a larger decision necessarily about whether this, semi-precious stone is better than the other. I'm like, to me, I'm kind of like, oh God, like what's the semi-precious stone again? Like, what's a CZ? I'm like, I don't know. Like what looks nice? I'm like, I don't know. Like, sure. Like, that's fine. It's like, what colors go with what, like that type of stuff. My mom loves it. Our integrator loves it. But for me, it's like, I think to me, and I shouldn't say this, I think fashion is like, it's quite, it is really dependent on who's looking at it.
Right. Beauty in the eye of the beholder. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's no universal like, oh, that looks nice. I mean, if you think it looks nice, it probably is nice. Someone might look at that and be like, oh, that looks like crap. It's like, I don't know. Right. So it's just, to me, it's too, it's just too much for me personally. And I was worried about that kind of sentiment seeping into the business if I were to just lead it that way. So identifying this integrator has been such a boon for us in terms of like, oh, I now can see the path forward for the next 10, 20 years.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so thinking about your kids, I know they're still young and all that kind of stuff, and thinking about future generations, what's your path in terms of like legacy and how that looks? Is it just going to be grandma at the dinner table pressuring them to join the business, or what is that?
Yeah, I would hope that that's not the case. Like, I would hope that I would be able to recognize that, like, hey, this is the same movie that I've been a part of, But what I say to that is, like, I went to one of these family business panels, and I think, this was a joke in kind, but I found it to be hilarious and I think right, which is to say, this gentleman was like, the best family business succession plan is to have one business per child. And I said, that's so true, because, otherwise it's always going to be like, who gets which business? What he was recommending was like, if you have 3 kids, you better open up 3 businesses so that each of them have a succession. And I said, yeah, that's probably right. But I think for me, the way that I think about it is like, again, like, I guess this could change, but I would assume that given my own experience with the family business, I would definitely not want to pressure them into deciding to or not to join. One thing that I would impart upon them is that they try, if they want to at least get a glimpse of it, and then decide. If at the end of the day it's not for them, fine. If it is, great. But even if it is for them, they're going to have to, in my mind, go through the same thing that I had, intentionality behind what they're doing. I'm not going to hand anything to you. And more so, it's going to be even easier because I'm not going to be in the CEO position. You're going to have to talk to this integrator person, and you're going to have to convince them that they think you're worthy of being a part of the business. Now, that may ruffle some feathers, but in my mind, my job as sustainability officer is to sustain the ecosystem, not necessarily to placate to my kids. I would hope that I've raised them well enough where they can be valuable members of the company. And if they want to start as an entry-level position, yeah, maybe I'll give them a leg up to say, hey, I'll give you that position. But to come in and think that you're going to just run the show, that's definitely not going to happen. I've taken a lot of myself out of that decision-making, which I think is probably a positive thing long-term. But I would say I'd be lying if I didn't say I hope that one, if not all, join the family business. As much as ironically speaking, after going through my parents and vehemently against it, there's a desire in my mind of I hope they can prolong this in a way that the Tsao family name continues on, and then that they find their own path within the family business, because there is a lot of positives that I've gotten, and a lot of, again, if I wasn't part of the family business, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met the center. I wouldn't have met, a lot of like-minded folks that I think is a really good community to be a part of. And I tend to believe that family businesses tend to do and offer better work, in terms of results, in terms of product. They care a lot more. And I feel like that's what our society needs anyways. It's like more people showing up and caring about what it is that they're doing. So a lot of those reasons I want them to be a part of it, but I'm not going to, lose sleep if they end up deciding it's not for them, and that's okay.
Right.
As long as they don't reject it out of hand. That's like my big thing. And I feel like my purpose when it comes to the center is really to make sure that, the next generation at least gives it a shot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think offering those opportunities is why we're here and opportunities to do exactly what you're doing, which is following that passion in some way. And for you, it's building that, finding that community engagement and everything like that. And for your kids, it may be something entirely different, but I love that legacy you're building.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where I feel like we're going to head in. That may change over time as I've learned about myself. Is each 5 years, it feels like things shift. But I feel like it's shifting more clear than it is becoming less clear, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, Kevin, this was amazing, man. I know we could go on forever. There's so many more questions I have for you, but I think it'd be good to have a round two at some point. If before we do sign off here, any way that anybody can get in touch with you or how can people connect if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open to having chats, especially about topics of family business or otherwise, but they can reach out to me directly at my email, which is kevin@enobrands.com. That's ENOBRANDS.com. Or find me on LinkedIn, send me a message or something. Or you can ask Adam. Adam knows me.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. But happy to impart any knowledge base that could be useful in any way. Hopefully some of this stuff resonates with some of your audience.
Oh, this was great. I know it can. I know a lot of us are, a lot of the people in family business struggle with the same issues. They may come out in a billion different ways. Yeah. But they all rhyme and they're all similar. And I think they can all relate to kind of what you're going through. Is we face challenges, we feel alone. We need that community. Yeah. And we need to think about what that means generationally down the line. And I think you've given some great insight into that. So Kevin, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah. The more that we spread the gospel of family business, the more that I think people are going to be like, oh, maybe there's something after all. Because there's a lot of the negative stuff, but there's also a lot of positive too. And people are part of that too. So, but thanks for having me, Adam. It's a pleasure chatting.
Yeah, always. And I'll look forward to seeing you at a future Family Business Council event, affinity group event. And if you're listening to this episode and you enjoyed this and you feel like there's another family business that can get a lot out of this, please share this episode, subscribe, like it, rate it, do all the things, and share some love with Kevin too. Send your good wishes his way. Kevin, thanks for being here. And everybody else out there listening, thanks for joining us today. We will see you next time.